Hello and welcome. Today's date comes in that of Friday, 3rd day of January 2020. My name is Derek, and like always, all bets, trades are the like, within each his own risk, their own reward. Go over gold, silver, and Bitcoin in this video. And one thing that I really don't do much of is watch the news. Thus, I will not always know a decent amount of what's really going on. But when things happen, you at least are going to find out. And I think I'm going to find out a lot via the comments, as it seems big things have happened in this world, thus game changer events. Or from what I barely know of just 90 seconds of watching Canadian news today, that the United States is quote-unquote under attack. And thus markets are probably going to react to such. And just the type of event that I thought, doesn't surprise me to hear how it goes. I'm not going to say anything more about it because I really don't know much more about it. For me, all I really do, for at least for looking at when I look at screens, I might watch a movie here and there. Definitely watching sports. Looking at sports, I'm doing a lot of daily fantasy, and that's a lot of work, and it's things I'm looking at. And then these markets here, trades when need be. And when I watch YouTube videos, oftentimes I'm not looking at the news. I've had this line of 1,522 in for quite some time, and it's a monstrous level. It came up to this point on New Year's Eve, resisted it, pulled back down, the continuation on that morning of such, and continued to resist it throughout the rest of the end of the decade. Then a new decade occurred, and on the 7th hour of New York time, I believe, because this is Eastern time, of the 2nd day of January, it broke the resistance. Nice little move, and this is a comeback. So this is when I say either it's a real one or a failure. So this breakout in here, it was obviously, we can see now, it is very, very, very real. It came back to where it came from. So if you happen to put a buy order at that spot, it would have, hopefully you would have got in, because the low was 1522.6. 4 pennies from this number. It's only luck that it was relatively even that close. But from that point on, what a terrific rally that has taken place, as it left this at 12 o'clock on January the 2nd, and it really started to break out 1920 hours in yesterday's night. And throughout the entire day today, it has been nothing more than a tremendous up move. But overall, I mean, we've gone from 1535 to 1552. That's like a percent. But the trend that the hourly chart is showing is fantastic. And now just looking at the last few periods from this high, we have a correctionary move right down into here. Hits the pretty close to the 18 lows, but decent amount in price, going from the 51 handle down to the 41 handle, or losing near that of 1%. But from that moment forward, one period hanging in there on this nice little good recovery within the period move, holding it and then breaking it back to this area of resistance, and then several periods in which it's like, wow, this is pretty strong setup here. You have these two in here, followed by, of course, this one, which came back. But when it came back to worked out to this level of support, worked out to the 18 highs, it managed to, what we're looking at now, to higher low, this low on January the 3rd, 8 a.m. or 8 o'clock this morning. But the current period, which is the 1 at 4. Why do we not have a new one? It's a weekend. Duh. I'm so used to, like, markets don't close, other than from like 5 o'clock to 6 o'clock in gold and silver, which is an intra-week when they do. But what a way to end the weekend, though. Holy crap. This is just a nice, beautiful setup, as I see this breaking out amongst such on the daily term time frame. Nicely extended above this 18 average, as it got above it on December the 23rd, and it's still been nonstop. We have like these 3 days of grinding higher, and it's like almost a correctionary move, but still going higher. Nice little setup. And now we've come up to this key level. So now we'll see how it plays out. It's already broken this fib point. 18 average again, up so high. Nice if there's going to be any big correctionary phase. But what's so obvious is just amongst this is levels of shorter term resistance has been clearly broken. So from this point on, it could continue to move forward in masculine levels, especially if there happens to be news to support it. And you could even have your correctionary moves where maybe we do come back to where we come from very quickly. I don't know what term to use, but situations where it happens in only so many periods, large scale individual ones and stuff like that. But this has been a nice little move from this low to this high, and at this stage, this is where I say I don't think this is going to be good resistance here. Well, now we're here. We started from the bottom, now we're here. I'm not going to do any singing because that's just a okay song. But at this point, it could have potential for major, large, explosive type moves continuing higher, which we'll see clearly on the longer term time frames. But when I say much resistance, maybe all we do is go sideways. Maybe we meet up or through price come down to the 18. And really where we came from, two different points. This one in here around 1507. And the deep one, and I would be really concerned, I don't think it will, is around 1485. And it might not even go down at all again because we could break these record levels and see points we haven't seen in quite some time. And on the weekly chart, we had a lot of resistance on this line here. We've only had a little bit here. We already can see a fib line at 1670, especially because this only took a little bit. I'd only be looking to set like short-term, intermediate type of levels of resistance. And the monthly chart has been in a nice, beautiful uptrend for quite some time. And the high that occurred amongst the fib mark in August had 1, 2, 3, 4 of these periods just chopping up and down, supporting the 59 handle. And resisting a little above, but pretty much at 15 and a quarter, we'll say. Well, now it looks like an attempt to break it. You see this clearly about 1584, 1588, yada, yada, yada. This thing is going to have an interesting range now. This range to previous high and then breaking previous high. Watch out. Silver's next. And on its monthly chart, it's holding up really nice, I like, with this 18. As it broke above it in July-August sessions, topping in September. But from that top, with that period included, 2, 3, 4 of these periods, and we're still in this in the 5th, but we see the potential that this could have a nice breakout point. You know, maybe we could continue this type of congesting within a productive 18 average for 4, 5, 6 months, and it might do it now, and you never know, but it is giving a lot of bullish tendencies, because I can state right now, if this thing breaks out in the month of January, which we're in, February-ish kind of deal, I'll be saying it was so obvious it was going to do it. Look at the setup we have like here. And now we're here. We started from the bottom, and we're pretty much at the bottom looking at this time frame. As this previous resistance, of course, is 50. On the daily chart, there's this lower high from here. And we have a second lower high. This one in here, and now, well, this one obviously is clearly above here, and technically this is a match to this level. We're getting above this, now we're talking about this range in here. But as far as where we go now, look at the upside versus downside comparison. Upside, we're still well above this 18 average, and we can see the 18 lows is about 17 and a half. And yeah, of course it could pierce below it and go down to where we came from, but does it look more like it's going to go up, down, or sideways? And I gotta say it's the first one in continuation up. We have the situation in here where after hitting this high, we have these productive sideways days, a little bit of an attempt here to break it out on New Year's Eve, obviously not doing so. But you see, it attempted that day to do it, comes back down to the range it had supported for the prior 2 days. Then the next day it attempts to go back up. And as we're in the completion of the Friday session, wow, it looks pretty productive. So to me, it does look, as we move into the next week, we're going to test some of these areas and maybe even up to close to 19 and maybe even breaking it. And if we break 19, then the talk of going to well over 19 and a half comes into play pretty quick as well. And let's go back to the longer term. This time we'll go quarterly. We got more data here, so... And I just love this setup as it is. $50 in 1980. We're about what, a week or so, 9-10 days ish. I'm gonna check that date. I just don't feel like it now. And I'll check on the weekend. But the 4-year anniversary of that high. Retest the high. Whenever you make a big move, you got to hold a higher low. And this is more productive here than down here. But this still could have counted to come down to this area here. Technically, if you just look at technicals, it shouldn't even do this because of the inflationary point. So the fact that we have a 1980 high, this type of correctionary move, and all it's done over the last first 2 decades of this millennium is come back to where we come from. And then, actually 1 decade really. Take 1 decade to do this, and then another decade of doing this. So therefore, the fact that it's low that way to me is a cool thing. Now let's finish this off with then Bitcoin, and we'll go time frames going backwards. So the 3-month chart after, or the quarterly, after the 2011 highs in here, the price point down to the 3,000, coming down the 18 average of lows. The earlier this past year, now I guess I'll state it as, breaking barely above it, so still holding this not yet declining 18 average for the decline that occurred from 20k to 3. Yeah, the rate of ascent slowed down, but it hasn't even went sideways. So the market status for reversal trend is an attempt to neutralize it by going sideways, which is really not getting above this higher level, and B, at least testing back again in the lower area. So there's no sign right now that this thing is even going to go neutral, but the signs on the breakouts above here, we can see the numbers, 12, 13, 15,000. Watch out, baby. I don't know what else to say, but beautiful setup, obviously, if that situation happens to occur. Next up, let's go ahead and take a look at this on the monthly term time frame, which amongst this is where it is neutral, because we can see the band is sideways. It's established the support. Whenever I talk about failing the 18, which we can see in here after having a spectacular move, is, well, at least for intermediate term, it's okay to make one low, but don't break it. And so far, so good. And if it comes back down and tests it and does that, well, it doesn't break it. But if it does break it, the fact that it's only came down here, I mean, technically, if it's not the end of the world, as one way of putting it, or it's still not, it's a bullish setup still. If it comes down here and then, we're talking about kilo, and kilo. And again, I don't know if that's going to be the case, but again, as I mentioned before, the breakout on the quarterly was showing big stuff. You can see if it's a breakout above the 18 here, that it would be a phenomenal run. The weekly chart is in a negative situation. It's in dire straits, if you will. It's been holding for quite some time, the 6,600 level. So any of this rally that we've had in here hasn't done anything to revert this, trying to revert this market over, because this is a lower high to here, and thus have a test of this previous support of 32. But when breaking this previous level of support in here, back in October, it technically made a new low, but I talk about like the Three Little Bears thing, a book I remember from a kid, and I think there might have been movies and whatever else, but mostly from books, that the porridge and the beds have to be just right. This is one of the situations where this isn't a just right move. And now I got to understand what's it telling me now. So we have this support, and all it does is come down here, but it's had a lot of this support in here. And of course, this trend is not changing. It's not neutralizing this with the band going this way. If it's able to hold this area and test 85, it'll at least neutralize the situation. But this really does tell me that this is almost like waiting for it's like a big bomb explosion. I don't know what word to use again for this, but it's a setup for something big to either direction, because this move is not supposed to go down to here. It's at least supposed to go down to this area here, I would think. And thus, it's either a continuation there, a short-term move of a small low, this support becoming resistance here, and then when the time is right, it obviously hasn't happened yet, it's going to have a decent move. But if this level holds and all the decline from this low to this successful bearish correctionary move only does this, to me, that's a failed situation. So if this holds and we see this at 93, 94, I mean, that's lights out again. In the long term, already says if it's already here, it's lights out. So this thing has the potential for some spectacular moves if it can first in the short term, which is in the month of January and even into February, hold this area and then break above 96. Let's continue on within the short term. Let's go to the hourly term, or the hourly time frame. I hate saying that same word twice like that. A lot of this resistance in play here, even a little bit here. So we have this low, and really, for what it's worth, this really isn't too volatile. Although when we shorten it more, it's going to look such. But with that being said, it is that failed breakdown spot. We had all of this support in here, and then this occurs down below it, and it's immediately recovered and not resisting this area, and then not only going up a little bit to where we came from, but going up a little bit higher and supporting the resistance that it had after just before then breaking its support. So we're seeing that shorter term failed break it. So if this is the case, then we got to talk serious that if this continues further, that these upper levels are most certainly in play. But before we get to these ones, we're talking about this major resistance level between about 75 and a quarter up to, we'll call it 7,800 area as a big key level of resistance on the single hour term time frame. This is where it gets relatively interesting. So there's that failed breakdown. We'll see how she goes from here. Anyway, thank you for tuning in. Have yourself a great day. Bye-bye.